There comes a time in your life when the noise of people becomes heavier than the silence of your own soul. You begin to notice how much of your happiness has been tied to the approval of others. You wait for messages, for attention, for reassurance, for someone to tell you that you matter. You look at people's reactions as if they are mirrors reflecting your worth back to you, and slowly, without realizing it, you hand over the keys to your peace to people who do not even know how to protect their own. Many people are surrounded by crowds and still feel abandoned. Many people are loved publicly and still cry privately. Because validation from people is temporary. It is a fragile thing. One moment they praise you, the next moment they criticize you. One day they celebrate your presence, the next day they ignore your existence. If you build your identity on human approval, your spirit will constantly shake with every opinion, every rejection, every silence. You must learn how to sit alone without feeling incomplete. That is one of the greatest powers a person can ever develop. To be alone and not feel lonely, to walk through life without begging people to confirm your value, to wake up in the morning and know who you are without needing applause. That kind of peace cannot be purchased. It must be built within yourself, brick by brick, through pain, through healing, through deep understanding. Some people spend their entire lives performing for others. They change their personality to fit into rooms that were never meant for them. They laugh when they are hurting. They say yes when their soul is screaming no. They tolerate disrespect because they are afraid of being abandoned. They shrink themselves to avoid making insecure people uncomfortable. They become prisoners of other people's opinions. But there is a dangerous cost to constantly needing validation. You lose yourself. You stop listening to your own intuition because you become addicted to outside voices. You become exhausted trying to keep everyone happy. And no matter how much you give, no matter how kind you are, no matter how much you sacrifice, it is never enough for people who are empty within themselves. You cannot spend your life chasing acceptance from people who do not even accept themselves. There is freedom in detachment, real freedom, the kind that allows you to breathe deeply again, the kind that teaches you not every relationship is meant to last forever. Not every person is meant to understand you. Not everyone will appreciate your heart, your loyalty, your softness, your depth, and that is all right. You must stop taking rejection as proof that you are unworthy. Sometimes rejection is protection. Sometimes distance is necessary. Sometimes people leave because your spirit no longer aligns with their chaos. And instead of mourning every ending, you must learn how to honor your own growth. The hardest thing for many people is learning to be emotionally independent, because from childhood many were taught to seek approval. Good grades for praise, good behavior for love, silence for acceptance, obedience for belonging. So they grow into adults who are terrified of disappointing people. They apologize for things that are not their fault. They over-explain themselves. They fear conflict because they fear abandonment. But healing begins the moment you realize you do not need permission to exist as yourself. You do not need everyone to understand your journey. You do not need everyone to agree with your choices. Some people will misunderstand you no matter how pure your intentions are. Some people will create stories about you simply because they cannot control you anymore. And if you spend your life trying to correct every misunderstanding, you will lose years of your peace. There is strength in silence. There is strength in no longer defending yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. There is strength in walking away calmly from places where your worth is constantly questioned. Living alone emotionally does not mean becoming cold-hearted. It does not mean isolating yourself from the world. It means your happiness no longer depends on whether someone texts you back, praises you, chooses you, or stays. It means you learn how to stand firmly within yourself. You become rooted in your own spirit instead of constantly leaning on unstable people. Many people fear loneliness because they have never truly met themselves. The moment the distractions disappear, they are forced to face their own wounds, insecurities, regrets, and emptiness. So they run toward noise, toward relationships, toward constant attention, toward anything that helps them avoid sitting quietly with their own thoughts. But solitude can become sacred if you allow it to teach you. When you spend time alone, you begin to hear your inner voice again. You begin to notice what truly matters to you. You stop living according to society's expectations and start living according to your spirit. You begin to understand that peace is more valuable than popularity. Authenticity becomes more important than approval, and slowly, you stop begging people to stay. One of the most painful truths in life is realizing that some people only loved the version of you they could control. The moment you start setting boundaries, speaking honestly, protecting your energy, and prioritizing your peace, they become uncomfortable. Because your growth exposes their dependence on your silence. Do not feel guilty for changing. Growth requires separation. Not everyone can come with you into your next chapter. Some people are attached to the old version of you because that version tolerated disrespect. That version abandoned itself to keep others comfortable. That version accepted crumbs and called it love. But you are not required to remain small just because people became comfortable with your suffering. Detachment is not bitterness. It is wisdom. It is understanding that attachment to people's opinions will drain your spirit. The more you depend on validation, the more power you give away. And the more power you give away, the emptier you become. You must learn how to validate yourself. Speak kindly to yourself. Celebrate your own progress. Comfort yourself during difficult nights. Become the safe place you spent your whole life searching for in other people. There will be moments when people disappoint you deeply. Moments when you realize your loyalty was not reciprocated. Moments when you gave your heart to people who only valued your usefulness. And those realizations hurt. They hurt because you expected your love to be handled gently. But pain can become a teacher. Pain teaches you discernment. Pain teaches you boundaries. Pain teaches you not to pour endlessly into people who never pour back into you. And eventually, after enough heartbreak, you stop chasing. You stop forcing connections. You stop exhausting yourself trying to earn love that should have been given naturally. You begin choosing peace over performance. The world often teaches people that being alone is failure. But many people in relationships are lonely. Many people surrounded by friends still feel unseen. Loneliness is not always about physical absence. Sometimes loneliness is being emotionally disconnected from yourself. When you detach from validation, something powerful happens. You stop fearing other people's opinions. You stop molding yourself into whatever earns applause. You stop betraying your own spirit for temporary acceptance. And in that freedom, you discover who you really are. You discover your own voice. You discover your own strength. You discover your own value. And perhaps for the first time in your life, you realize you were never lacking. You were simply searching for yourself in places that could never hold your soul properly. There are people who will only appreciate you once you stop needing them, because confidence unsettles those who depend on your insecurity. When you no longer chase approval, you become powerful. Your presence changes. Your energy changes. You stop carrying desperation in your spirit, and desperation pushes people away. But peace attracts differently. A person at peace with themselves does not beg. They do not compete. They do not force. They understand that what is truly meant for them will not require self-betrayal. You must stop measuring your worth through human inconsistency. People are unpredictable. Their opinions change daily. One moment they admire confidence. The next moment they call it arrogance. One moment they praise your kindness. The next moment they take advantage of it. If you build your emotional stability around unstable opinions, your life will become emotionally exhausting. Instead, build your life on inner certainty. Know who you are privately, not just publicly. Know your value even in silent rooms where nobody is applauding you. Know your heart even when others misunderstand your intentions. That is emotional maturity. There is a deep peace that comes when you stop explaining yourself constantly. You realize not everyone deserves access to your inner world. Not everyone deserves your energy. Some people only ask questions so they can judge your answers. Some people only stay close enough to monitor your growth, protect your spirit. You do not owe unlimited access to people simply because they know your name. And you do not need to fear walking alone. Some of the most transformative seasons of life happen in solitude. In those quiet moments, you rebuild yourself. You discover your resilience. You heal from years of emotional dependence. You begin understanding that your existence has value even when nobody is watching. The need for validation often comes from wounds that were never healed. Perhaps you spent years feeling unseen. Perhaps you were only acknowledged when you achieved something. Perhaps love felt conditional. So you learned to earn affection through pleasing others. But real healing begins when you stop performing for love. You deserve relationships where you can exist naturally. Relationships where you are not constantly anxious about being enough. Relationships where your value is not based on how useful, entertaining, attractive, or agreeable you are. And until those relationships arrive, you must learn how to become whole on your own, not because isolation is superior, but because dependency is dangerous. When your emotional survival depends entirely on people, you tolerate things that destroy your spirit. You accept disrespect because you fear loneliness more than pain. You cling to unhealthy relationships because being abandoned feels unbearable. But loneliness will never destroy you the way self-abandonment will. Every time you silence your truth to keep someone comfortable, you abandon yourself. Every time you beg for love that should flow naturally, you abandon yourself. Every time you tolerate emotional neglect because you are afraid to be alone, you abandon yourself. And eventually your soul becomes exhausted from carrying the weight of constant self-betrayal. Choose yourself, not selfishly, not arrogantly, but truthfully. Choose your peace, choose your dignity, choose your emotional freedom. People may not always celebrate your boundaries. Some will call you distant because they no longer have unlimited access to your energy. Some will accuse you of changing because you no longer tolerate behavior that once wounded you. Let them misunderstand. Growth often looks offensive to people who benefited from your lack of boundaries. You cannot heal while constantly returning to environments that require your self-destruction. Sometimes detachment is necessary for survival. You must understand that your worth does not decrease because someone failed to recognize it. Diamonds remain valuable even when ignored. The sun still shines even when clouds cover it. Your value is not dependent on human recognition. And once you truly understand that, you stop chasing validation like oxygen. You begin moving differently. You become calmer. You become more selective. You stop arguing with people determined to misunderstand you. You stop proving your goodness to people committed to seeing the worst in you. You stop forcing yourself into spaces where your spirit feels heavy, and suddenly life becomes lighter. Not perfect, but lighter. Because emotional freedom removes unnecessary suffering. Many people suffer not because life is impossible, but because they are emotionally attached to outcomes they cannot control. They want everyone to understand them, approve of them, choose them, love them correctly. But human beings are imperfect, and if your peace depends on perfection from others, Disappointment will become your constant companion. Detach not from love, not from compassion. Detach from expectations that imprison your peace. Learn how to give without attaching your worth to the response. Learn how to love without losing yourself. Learn how to care without carrying everyone emotionally. Some people are drowning because they spend their lives trying to save people who refuse to save themselves. You cannot heal people by abandoning your own healing. There comes a moment when you must stop overextending yourself for people who would never do the same for you. Stop shrinking your needs. Stop silencing your pain. Stop pretending you are strong every second of the day just to maintain an image. Being emotionally independent does not mean never needing people. It means your identity is not destroyed when people disappoint you. You remain whole even after rejection. You remain worthy even after abandonment. You remain valuable even when misunderstood. That is inner strength, and inner strength changes everything. Because once you discover peace within yourself, external validation loses its control over you. Compliments become appreciated but not necessary. Attention becomes pleasant but not essential. You no longer build your life around being noticed. You begin building your life around being authentic. There is something beautiful about a person who no longer needs to prove their value. They move quietly. They stop competing for attention. They stop forcing connections. Their confidence becomes peaceful instead of loud, and peaceful confidence is rare. The world is filled with people desperately trying to be chosen while abandoning themselves in the process. Do not become one of them. Be willing to walk alone if it means protecting your soul. Be willing to disappoint people if it means remaining honest with yourself. Be willing to release relationships that constantly drain your spirit, because your peace matters. Your emotional well-being matters. Your inner life matters. At the end of the day, people will come and go. Some relationships will last. Others will end unexpectedly. Some people will love you deeply. Others will misunderstand you completely. That is life. But the relationship you have with yourself will follow you everywhere. So nurture it carefully. Speak to yourself with kindness. Forgive yourself for the years you spent begging for acceptance. Forgive yourself for the times you ignored your own intuition just to keep people close. Forgive yourself for settling for less than you deserved because loneliness frightened you. You were learning, and now you know better. Now you understand that peace cannot be found through constant validation. Now you understand that your worth exists independently of human approval. Now you understand that solitude is not punishment. Sometimes solitude is preparation. Sometimes solitude is healing. Sometimes solitude is where you finally meet the strongest version of yourself. And once you discover that strength, you stop fearing abandonment. Because you realize you can survive being alone. You realize your spirit is capable of carrying itself. You realize your value does not disappear when people walk away. And from that realization comes freedom. The kind of freedom that allows you to live honestly. The kind of freedom that allows you to love without attachment. The kind of freedom that allows you to exist without constantly seeking permission from the world. That freedom is priceless. Protect it, nurture it, and never trade your inner peace for temporary validation again. Your worth is not measured by the eyes that fail to recognize it. Too many people walk through life believing they are only valuable when someone else approves of them, praises them, chooses them, or stays beside them. They hand their confidence over to human opinion and wait for the world to tell them who they are. And when people overlook them, misunderstand them, or fail to appreciate their heart, they begin doubting themselves. They shrink. They question their beauty, their intelligence, their kindness, their purpose. But the inability of others to see your value does not erase the value you carry within you. A diamond remains precious even in darkness. The ocean remains powerful even when nobody is standing beside it, admiring the waves. The stars still burn in the sky even when clouds hide them from view. Your worth has never depended on visibility. It has never depended on applause. It has never depended on whether people had the emotional depth to recognize what you bring into this world. Some people are incapable of appreciating goodness because they are too consumed by their own emptiness. Some people only notice what benefits them directly. Some only value loudness and overlook quiet strength. Some confuse kindness with weakness because they have never encountered genuine softness before. And if you are not careful, you will spend years trying to convince emotionally blind people that your soul deserves to be seen. There is nothing more exhausting than trying to prove your value to people determined to overlook it. You begin overgiving, over-explaining, over-sacrificing. You stretch yourself thin, trying to earn recognition that should have been offered naturally. You become addicted to being useful because usefulness feels safer than simply being loved for who you are. Many people learned this pattern early in life. They were praised only when they achieved something, loved only when they pleased others, acknowledged only when they performed well. So they grew into adults who constantly seek external validation to feel worthy. They become uncomfortable when ignored because invisibility reminds them of old wounds. They fear rejection because rejection feels like confirmation that they are not enough. But your worth is not a debate. It is not something people vote on. It is not something that disappears because somebody failed to appreciate your presence. Human beings are limited by their own perceptions, insecurities, and experiences. Some people will meet you while carrying jealousy in their hearts. Some will meet you while emotionally unavailable. Some will encounter your love after being damaged by others and will project old pain onto your sincerity. Their inability to receive you properly is not proof that you are lacking. You must stop personalizing every disappointment. Not everyone who loses you truly understood you. Not everyone who walks away is capable of recognizing what they left behind. Some people abandon healthy things because chaos feels more familiar to them. Some people sabotage genuine connections because intimacy frightens them. Some people only value things after they are gone because immaturity blinds them while they still have access. And yet so many people internalize rejection as proof of unworthiness. They sit awake at night replaying conversations, questioning themselves, wondering what they should have changed to be loved correctly. They think if they had been prettier, quieter, smarter, calmer, more agreeable, more patient, more entertaining, maybe they would have been chosen. But there are people who were deeply loved and still abandoned. There are people who gave everything and were still betrayed. Human inconsistency is not a reflection of your value. You cannot build your identity around the unstable opinions of others. People change constantly. Their moods change, their desires change, their loyalties change. If your confidence depends on human consistency, your spirit will forever feel unsafe. Real confidence begins when you understand your value independently of external recognition. It is waking up and respecting yourself even when nobody applauds you. It is continuing to love your heart even after someone mishandled it. It is understanding that rejection does not define your identity. There will always be people who misunderstand you because they only see life through the lens of their own limitations. A person who lacks honesty may suspect honesty in others. A person who lacks compassion may overlook your kindness entirely. A person consumed by insecurity may feel threatened by your confidence. You cannot force emotionally unavailable people to fully recognize your depth, and you should stop exhausting yourself trying. Some flowers are never appreciated in the environments they grow in. A rose placed in darkness may never be admired, but its beauty still exists. Sometimes you are not surrounded by people capable of seeing you clearly. Sometimes your environment is too shallow to appreciate your depth. That does not make you less valuable. The tragedy is that many people abandon themselves while seeking validation from others. They become shapeshifters. They silence parts of their personality. They dim their light. They tolerate disrespect. They stay in one-sided relationships hoping their loyalty will eventually be noticed. They settle for crumbs because they secretly believe they must earn love through suffering. But love that requires self-abandonment will always wound you. You must learn to stop begging for acknowledgement from people who benefit from overlooking you. Some people intentionally minimize your worth because recognizing your value would force them to confront their own inadequacies. Some people keep others emotionally starved because insecurity enjoys control. And when you constantly seek validation from those people, you slowly lose your sense of self. You begin measuring your value through delayed replies, inconsistent affection, temporary attention, and conditional acceptance. Your emotions rise and fall depending on how others respond to you. One compliment makes you feel worthy. One criticism destroys your confidence. That is emotional imprisonment. Freedom begins when you stop handing strangers the authority to define you. Not everyone deserves the power to influence how you see yourself. A person who cannot even manage their own emotions should not have the authority to determine your value. A person who projects their pain onto others should not become the judge of your worth. Yet many people allow wounded individuals to shape their self-image completely. You must become more protective of your spirit. The world will always contain people who fail to recognize goodness. History itself is filled with individuals who were misunderstood, rejected, or overlooked long before they were appreciated. Human beings often fail to recognize value when it appears in forms they do not expect. Sometimes your quietness will be mistaken for weakness. Sometimes your kindness will be mistaken for desperation. Sometimes your confidence will be mistaken for arrogance. Let people misunderstand. You do not need universal approval to possess value. A tree does not stop growing because someone refuses to sit beneath its shade. The sun does not refuse to rise because someone complains about the heat. Your existence does not require constant validation to remain meaningful. And perhaps the most dangerous thing you can do is wait for other people to confirm what you should already know about yourself. Because if you do not recognize your own worth, you will continue accepting less than you deserve. You will tolerate half-hearted love. You will remain in draining environments. You will cling to people who only appreciate your usefulness. You will continuously lower your standards to avoid feeling rejected. People who do not recognize their value often confuse attention with love. They become attached to anyone who gives them temporary reassurance. Even unhealthy connections feel comforting because deep down they are starving for acknowledgement. But attention is not the same as appreciation. Some people enjoy your presence without valuing your humanity. Some enjoy what you provide without caring for your emotional well-being. Some only recognize your importance once you stop giving to them endlessly. And that realization changes you. You begin understanding that your worth cannot depend on how much others are willing to take from you. You begin realizing that being needed is not the same as being loved. You stop overextending yourself just to feel important, because true worth does not beg. True worth does not chase. True worth does not collapse every time someone fails to recognize it. There will be moments in life when you feel unseen, moments when your efforts go unnoticed, moments when your love is not reciprocated properly. But those moments are not evidence that you are insignificant. They are reminders that human recognition is limited. Your soul carries value beyond public acknowledgement, and the moment you truly understand that, you stop shrinking yourself for acceptance. You stop performing for validation. You stop chasing people who cannot see your heart clearly. You begin standing firmly within yourself, knowing that even if the world misunderstands you, overlooks you, or walks away from you, your worth remains untouched. Peace enters your life the moment you stop waiting for people to choose you before you choose yourself. So many people spend years chasing acceptance, trying to earn attention, trying to prove they are worthy of love, respect, and recognition. They shape themselves into whatever others seem to prefer. They silence parts of their personality, hide their emotions, and abandon their truth just to avoid rejection. And without realizing it, they slowly lose themselves while trying to be accepted by everyone else. The need to be chosen can quietly become an emotional addiction. You begin measuring your worth by how people respond to you. If someone gives you attention, you feel valuable. If someone ignores you, you feel invisible. If someone leaves, you question your entire identity. Your peace becomes controlled by human inconsistency, and that is one of the most exhausting ways to live. People are unpredictable. Their feelings change. Their priorities shift. Some people love you deeply one day and become distant the next. Some only choose you when it is convenient for them. Some enjoy your presence but never truly value your heart. And if your happiness depends entirely on people staying loyal, attentive, and emotionally consistent, your spirit will constantly feel unstable. Many people fear being alone more than they fear losing themselves. That fear causes them to remain in unhealthy situations far longer than they should. They tolerate disrespect because abandonment feels unbearable. They accept half-hearted love because loneliness seems frightening. They continue chasing emotionally unavailable people, hoping one day they will finally feel chosen. But there is no peace in constantly begging for what should come naturally. There is no peace in shrinking yourself just to fit inside someone else's comfort zone. There is no peace in pretending to be less emotional, less ambitious, less honest, or less powerful simply to remain accepted. True peace begins when you stop asking the world for permission to exist as yourself. The moment you stop needing validation from everyone around you, something changes within you. You become calmer. You stop chasing attention. You stop forcing conversations. You stop over-explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stop exhausting your spirit trying to earn appreciation from people who only recognize your value once you are gone. And that freedom feels different. Many people spend their entire lives trying to become desirable enough to avoid rejection. They become performers instead of authentic human beings. Every interaction becomes a test. Every silence becomes anxiety. Every delayed response becomes self-doubt. They overanalyze everything because deep down they are terrified of not being wanted, but constantly needing reassurance creates emotional suffering. You begin depending on people to regulate your emotions. If they are affectionate, you feel secure. If they become distant, you panic. Your inner peace becomes dependent on external behavior. And that kind of emotional dependence will always leave you vulnerable. Peace enters your life when you realize your worth does not disappear because someone failed to recognize it. Not everyone has the emotional maturity to appreciate genuine people. Some people are too distracted by their own wounds. Some are emotionally unavailable. Some are incapable of recognizing healthy love because chaos feels more familiar to them. And some people simply lack the depth to see what stands before them. Their inability to appreciate you properly is not proof that you are lacking. A flower remains beautiful even if nobody stops to admire it. The ocean does not lose its power because someone is too distracted to notice the waves. Your value exists independently of human recognition. Once you understand that deeply, rejection begins to lose its power over you. You stop internalizing every disappointment. You stop blaming yourself for other people's emotional limitations. You stop believing you must constantly prove your worth through sacrifice, overgiving, or emotional exhaustion. Instead, you begin protecting your peace. You become more selective about who receives your energy. You stop chasing people who repeatedly show inconsistency. You stop forcing yourself into spaces where your spirit feels unwanted. And most importantly, you stop abandoning yourself for temporary validation. There is something powerful about a person who no longer desperately needs to be chosen. Their confidence becomes quiet. They no longer compete for attention because they understand their value is not determined by popularity. They no longer beg people to stay because they understand forced connection is not real connection. They begin valuing peace more than attachment. That shift changes every relationship in your life. You stop tolerating emotional confusion. You stop romanticizing inconsistency. You stop accepting bare minimum affection simply because you are afraid of being alone. Because eventually you realize loneliness is not the worst thing that can happen to you. Losing yourself is far worse. There are people who stay in draining relationships for years because they believe being chosen is better than being alone. But what kind of love requires you to constantly betray your own needs? What kind of connection demands silence in exchange for acceptance? What kind of peace can exist in relationships where you are always anxious about being abandoned? Real love does not constantly make you feel unworthy. Real connection does not require endless performance, and real peace cannot exist where self-abandonment lives. The need to be chosen often comes from wounds that were never healed. Some people grew up feeling unseen. Some only received affection when they achieved something or pleased others. Some were taught that love had to be earned. So they grow into adults who constantly seek approval because they never learned how to validate themselves internally. But healing begins when you stop chasing validation outside yourself. Healing begins when you realize your existence alone carries value. You do not need to constantly impress people to deserve respect. You do not need to overextend yourself to deserve love. You do not need to become smaller to make insecure people comfortable. The moment you stop needing everyone to choose you, you also stop fearing rejection in the same way. You begin understanding that people leaving does not automatically mean you are unworthy. Sometimes people leave because they are emotionally unavailable. Sometimes they leave because your growth no longer aligns with their comfort. Sometimes they leave because they cannot meet you at your level of honesty, loyalty, or emotional depth. And sometimes people fail to choose you simply because they are still lost within themselves. That is not your burden to carry. Peace enters your life when you stop taking every rejection personally, when you stop turning human inconsistency into evidence against your value. When you stop believing your worth rises and falls based on who stays beside you. You become emotionally freer. You stop chasing closure from people incapable of giving it. You stop begging for understanding from people committed to misunderstanding you. You stop waiting for validation that may never arrive. And slowly, you begin building a life rooted in self-respect instead of external approval. That kind of peace is rare because most people are still trapped in the need to be desired. They constantly compare themselves to others. They seek attention to feel significant. They monitor who supports them, who notices them, who praises them. Their entire emotional world revolves around outside reactions, but external validation is temporary. One moment people celebrate you, the next moment they criticize you. One day they choose you, another day they overlook you. If your peace depends on public opinion, your spirit will forever feel unstable. Inner peace begins when your identity becomes rooted within yourself instead of within the opinions of others. You stop needing constant reassurance. You stop performing for acceptance. You stop exhausting yourself trying to earn love from emotionally unavailable people. And in that emotional freedom, you finally begin to breathe differently, calmly, honestly, without the constant fear of not being enough for the world around you.